We are live here with Coach Don Patterson for Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. I'm, of course, your host, Corey Bratta. We are coming to you on a Sunday evening, not really even a day removed from what happened late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, Don. And you've gotten a chance now to watch the game, although you acknowledged to me before we went live that you were not able to watch the third and fourth quarters back because you were not planning on taping 7 hours worth of Iowa football last night.
That's true. As you're well aware, Corey, we were tied up with our 20th reunion at Western Illinois. So I, of course, had taped the game before he ever left town. And as you mentioned, the one thing I hadn't counted on is that I might need to tape for 7 hours. So I did stay up right to the end. I watched the game. We got back to our friend's house last night, early second quarter. So I got to see a lot of the game in real time. Missed the first quarter, of course, but at least I got to see the second. And of course, in the third quarter, we had our first stoppage. And but I persevered. I was right there to the bitter end. So at least I got to see the last 10 minutes of the third quarter and all the fourth quarter one time in real time. That's the only time I saw it. And since we were guests at a friend's home, I wasn't making any copious notes. I didn't really think that would be appropriate. I had the volume turned way down. But I was aware, as an example, talking about lost opportunities. Here we are with the pick six by Terry Roberts, and it has to come back because we had one defensive lineman in the neutral zone. And you've heard me say before, people say, well, we only had 25 yards in penalties. Well, were any of those 5-yard penalties, did any of them negate a touchdown? I mean, it happens sometimes. And thankfully, we didn't need it anyway, but it's a good teaching point for our players. You know, even a 5-yard penalty can cost you a game.
And Don, Terry Roberts is, boy, I tell you, he continues to kind of catch tough breaks, but he's always in the right place at the right time. And you just feel like he's going to get a pick six. He's going to get maybe he gets involved in the return game or another fumble recovery. He just always seems to be in the right place at the right time. I think back to the Iowa State game where he had the pick and clearly was upset with himself for not staying on his feet and potentially returning that game for a touchdown. Had he done that, who knows, maybe Iowa wins that game. But it seems like Terry Roberts is just playing really well. And I made the comment last night during the short post-game show that I hosted here on this channel. To me, this defense and special teams unit collectively could be the best tandem units, if you will, of the Phil Parker, LeVar Woods era. And that's even acknowledging the fact that they had turnover at place kicker heading into the season. I thought Drew Stevens looked really good. Don, you know I've been touting him as maybe Iowa's, most certainly in my opinion, Iowa's best kicker, just based on what I know from practice. But he finally gets into a game. He looked good. To me, Torrey Taylor is the MVP right now of this team. Cooper DeJean is performing at an incredibly high level. I think you and I were both pleasantly surprised with Quinn Schulte. And honestly, Riley Moss has been kind of a quiet guy. I know he gave up a touchdown to Xavier Hutchinson he once back, but just your overall takeaways from another dominant performance from both of those units.
Well, I made the comment at halftime. I said it would actually surprise me if Nevada scores in this game. I was not surprised that we shut them out. To be honest with you, I think we could have played another 60 minutes and they still wouldn't have scored for two reasons. One is they're not very good on offense, but let's not take anything away from how well we play and how thoroughly we defend the field. Nothing comes easy if you're playing against our defense, and it certainly didn't come easy for Nevada. That didn't surprise me at all.
Folks, we are here for the next hour and a half. Our plan is to go until 8:30, as long as we have people who are here. And I can see the number growing here, but we got about 110. We're broadcasting on both channels once again on this Sunday evening for a special edition of Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson. So if you want to join the show, you can call in. The phone number is on the bottom ticker there, 515-635-1601. You can also join by clicking in the link in the description below. You can either join with video or without video, and that's the easier of the two ways to get through to ask Coach or I a question, preferably Coach, because I'm not, as you know, Don, I'm no authority compared to what you bring to the table. I will say this. You are familiar with Incarnate Word because of your time in the FCS. That team put up 55 against Nevada's defense. I think we can acknowledge that. But I think you also acknowledge, to be fair here, Nevada put up 42 on a good Incarnate Word FCS program. Now, again, apples and oranges, I get it. But I think it's fair to say what Iowa did last night, regardless of FBS opponent, is impressive to be able to hold a team. And I don't even have the numbers in front of me. I guess I'm pull them up here. Total yards from yesterday for Nevada, 151. That's just got to be hard to do. And was it Cooper DeJean? Somebody made the point in the post-game press conference, Don, that one would think that during a couple of long delays, that would be a time for an offensive coaching staff to scheme something to try to hit a big play. And they talked about that during the break. Just, Don, from your coaching experience, I'm sure you had some delays, nothing like a 7-hour game, but how do you keep your guys focused and prepare for something like this where, boy, the way Iowa plays, there's a very slim margin for error on defense?
Well, truthfully, as an offensive coach, one of the things you realize before you coach very many football games, halftime doesn't last very long. So you got every minute counts at halftime. And obviously you're coming up with a plan for the second half that's a little bit different, if not a lot different than the first half. And one of the things you'd like to be able to do, of course, maybe is to even introduce a new play based on the fact that they're doing something considerably different than what you expected. You normally don't have time to do that. And yet with the weather delay, you've got all kinds of time. So that's exactly true. You certainly have time to install a few plays that maybe you hadn't practiced all week long. But if you have a chance to talk the team through those plays, you can certainly execute them after that weather delay.
We've got a caller here waiting on hold. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, who's on the line.
Zach, how's it going, Corey?
Good. How are you, Zach?
Pretty good. How you recovered from last night?
How am I recovering? I'm recovering. I mean, I'm still behind on some sleep. I'll admit that, Zach. But boy, I cannot. I'm glad, and Don, I hate you and I are on the same page. Leaving games early, but I couldn't take it anymore. I really, and I told you that, Don. I couldn't take it. I can't take it. What is literally a 3.5 hour delay if you counted? Well, no, not 3.5 hours. No, 3.5 hours.
Yeah, that's about right.
About 3.5 hour delay. I applaud everybody who stuck around. I understand that security. They were telling people that the game was over at one point, and because there were a couple media people that were tweeting that out. I won't say who, but there were media people tweeting out that the game was over. So Zach, it was just a wild day. And as I told Don before we went live, I'm just glad they got this game in. It's final, and you can move on.
Yes. I'm glad it wasn't a no contest where the stats didn't count. I was fully expecting to wake up this morning and hearing it was technically 0-0. So, but I will have to give you credit, Corey, because you called it preseason. You touted Caleb Johnson, Cooper DeJean, and I think even Aaron Graves. And all three of them had good nights. I think Cooper could have had at least maybe 3 interceptions last night.
Well, it's not like I'm some great prophet there, Zach. I think anybody that really understood the high school careers of Caleb Johnson, Aaron Graves, and Cooper DeJean would have agreed with me on that. But that's a good. I guess we could segue into that. Well, we got Zach on the phone, Don. I wanted to bring up Aaron Graves. It was nice to see him get some time, and I saw him. Of course, he made the sack and then the pressure late in the game, but he was in there earlier. Before the first delay, I saw him looking back at some footage today. He was in there earlier, which I don't know that I'd have to go back up the participation charts weeks 1 and 2. But boy, as I said, Don, he does not look like a true freshman.
I was simply going to say he did not look out of place to be out there playing in the game. Yeah, he's a very unusual freshman, no doubt about it.
And then, of course, Caleb Johnson, I think you could say the same thing. Don, that first run, as I watched that run back this morning, that was an impressive run. Nice little jump cut through the hole, decisive, and then just the power of a young man who, again, does not look like a true freshman at 6'1.5", 220. Just talk about his skill set and what you saw yesterday, especially with his ability to hit the home run. Yeah,
here's a guy that comes to mind a long time ago, and the thing that I noticed about him, he had, of course, 2 long runs. He reminds me, you might say he's a poor man's version of Eric Dickerson. He reminds me of Eric Dickerson a little bit because he's very, very smooth stride. He's got deceptive speed. He's actually a little faster than what people think. And he proved it, of course, by having a couple of home run plays from scrimmage. It's nice to be able to hit some big runs for big yardage because that's been a problem for us. We haven't had of course, Tyler had a few long runs a year ago, too. and it is part of our offense to be able to break off some explosive plays in the run game. But I'd say it this way: he really did compliment Gavin very well. He's certainly, if he's the guy in relief, we're going to be in good shape. And of course, a lot of people would argue, let's give him a few more snaps and give Gavin a few less. I'd be okay with that too. It doesn't bother me if they share the load a little more evenly than what they did last night, because our new freshman does have big playability, no doubt about it.
And then the final person, our caller Zach brings up, Cooper DeJean should have had a pick six early. That was I think he would have certainly taken that back. Iowa's had some opportunity. That's one thing that I'm sure Phil Parker's pointing out to his guys, that hey, we've got an opportunity to put points on the board, and right now we're not doing it. Although they have scored a couple of safeties. And Don, how about this? This is something I didn't bring up when mentioning special teams. Iowa should have 4 blocked punts right now, because Jackson Reckroth runs over. I don't know how he did that. He ran past the ball, over the ball. And then let's not forget, I believe it was game 1, or was it game 2? One of the games where Lucas Van Ness was clearly in position to block a punt, and it went right between his arms. Iowa right now, again, I just cannot put into words how well polished they are in almost every phase of special teams play.
Yeah, you don't see any weaknesses. I guess the one thing that concerns me the most right now, I'd say our kickoff returns have been pretty pedestrian, pretty average. And I'm not sure why. You might assign a certain responsibility to the guys up front, for creating a little bit of a wider lane between 2 cover guys than what they're used to, what they want to be. But you could also maybe suggest that the guy, I know what I used to tell Smith Marset. I said, I like the way you return kicks, primarily because you understand you take the ball and it's no hesitation, 100 miles an hour. If you make a move, it absolutely has to be on the run. And that's how you bust a big kick return. So up until now, we haven't quite been able to do that. We've been okay with our returns, but that's an area where I think we can still improve. And for that matter, punt returns, we had a punt return last night, I believe, for 25 yards, the longest one. I think we had 3 for 41. But it was poor coverage on the one that was 25 yards. We outflanked them. There really was no excuse for us being able to outflank them on that punt return. And we didn't really make anybody miss to cover that 25 yards. We just ran the open grass and then got bumped out of bounds, of course, after a nice return. So our return game is something we can take a look at. I'd give higher marks right now to our cover units and, of course, to the guy doing the punting and the guy doing the kicking on kickoffs, because how many have they returned? Most of them have been touchbacks.
Yep, and one last question I have for you, Corey, and then I'll sign off, let other people call in. My one concern, I did like that they were throwing deep last night, even though there were, I think, almost all of them missed. But my one concern is the offensive line still, because Logan Jones still looks like he's a second or second and a half late on the snaps. And that's going to, obviously, come Big Ten season, that's going to bode not well for Spencer. But, yeah, it's one to get thoughts on that. And, everybody hit the like button, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate the call. And that's a good point. I was going to bring up Logan Jones. I feel bad for the kid because he's new to this. He was playing defensive line last year, fighting off injury. But he seems to be struggling, not only blocking, but just getting snaps off on time. I know you're not a former offensive line coach, but what are you seeing up front from Logan?
Well, it's not an easy position to play. Some people might think it is, but it's not. Just imagine having to snap the ball, especially if we're in the shotgun, and somehow get your hands up and be able to block somebody a split second later. That's what you have to do. And of course you got to remember the snap counts. You got to get the ball not just off on time, but throw it back there with good accuracy. And of course a high snap can be catastrophic. So thankfully Spencer's pretty tall, and he's been able to reel in a couple of high snaps already in this young season. So he'll get better, no doubt about it. He's got a lot of good help with the coaches we have. Coach Barnett is an outstanding offensive line coach. And, of course, both Kirk and Brian also are offensive line coaches. So we'll continue to get better with Logan. I think he's doing the very best he can, and he's a competitive guy. I just like the idea that we have another physical person playing that position that happens to be wearing the same number 65 as our All-American from a year ago. I'm sure he wouldn't wear that number if he didn't intend to play a lot like that All-American that played before him.
I want to address, first of all, springtime. Alex, I believe Springman is his last name. Alex came up to me during our weather delay live stream. So pleasure to meet you, Alex, and appreciate you stopping by and saying hi. Again, I've never, we've mentioned it on the air, Don, and do you remember weather delay? I mean, how many weather delays would you say you've had in your coaching tenure?
Well, 37 years of coaching. Frankly, I think I'd probably count them on one hand.
Wow.
So it's been very rare.
Isn't that odd, though? I mean, you would expect if lightning delays a game, you would expect for over the course of how many years you coach that you'd get some lightning here and there.
There's probably more than 5. I just can't recall all the games. But honestly, of course, when September turns to October, then the lightning tends to go away also. So you don't have weather delays in October, November. At least we hope we don't, because the weather delay in November might be to remove some snow or something.
Our call line is open, folks, 515-635-1601. And while we're kind of in between phone calls here, Don, I've got some notes I want to pass by you and just get your thoughts on. We haven't been able to do that the first 2 weeks of the season. Usually you and I both have notes specifically on what happened during each game, but these first 2 weeks, as you know, have been very unique. Not that yesterday wasn't unique. It might have been the most unique game we've had this year. But and to our caller who just called in, I'm going to put you on hold. But my first note is Caleb Johnson. Not only and brought him up as a ball carrier, but Don, let's not forget you brought up kickoff returns. I believe this is the first time he's returned a kickoff. And so you got Gavin and Caleb back there returning kickoffs. And if I'm not mistaken, it had been Riley Moss.
That's correct.
So that is a note for people who are following that Caleb was back there for and in Iowa's defense, Don, it's not like they've had a ton of opportunities to return kicks.
Very true. Very true. It's not a very big sample yet. There's a lot of football left to be played. But I guess it stands out because we simply haven't had a return out toward midfield. I don't recall anything nearly that lengthy. So areas for improvement. You know, we can do a better job returning kicks.
Also, let's give some credit to some of these guys that maybe hadn't gotten so much playing time games 1 and 2. Reggie Bracey made a huge play, started the second half. It was a muffed kickoff catch, if you will, on the return for Nevada to start that third quarter. Reggie Bracey gets behind on the play. He doesn't catch up. I mean, he went on an all-out sprint to catch the return man. Had he not done that, it'd have been 17-7 heading into that first delay, Don, and who knows what happens at that point with some momentum towards Nevada.
Yeah, over 37 years of coaching, I've seen some kickoffs that play out much like that one did. If the return guy muffs the kick and is scrambling for the ball, the tendency on the part of the coverage unit is to come roaring on downfield, thinking, of course, they might make a tackle inside the 10 or even inside the 5. And there's a tendency at that point not to break down quite as well as you should. And, of course, if you can breach that, then the race is on. And as you said, Bracey made a nice play. And the thing I liked to be able to talk about, he really sold out entirely to be able to get that tackle. He barely grabbed him really very low on his leg, down around his ankle, and was able to pull him down. But the point is, an all-out effort is the only thing that saved the play. That's what it took, and that's what he gave.
Terrific play by Reggie Bracey. Let's get to our next caller. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, who's on the line.
Yeah, this is Pat, Minnesota.
Hey, Pat.
And I just wanted to bounce a few things off you guys, and I really appreciate your show. And anyway, I just wanted to mention that, again, I hate to beat something to death like in this, but I'm first of all, I'm really happy. Obviously, Iowa won. I wasn't worried about that game, though, based on what our offenses look like. Anyway, I've lost confidence in Kirk and Brian in terms of, every good CEO of a company or coach, I would think, changes his system to utilize the talent that they have or make adjustments. And when I watched the Purdue games this year, as a lot of Iowa fans, probably do, when I see what Charlie Jones is doing at Purdue, I know they have a different system, and also Tyrone Tracy now. Jones caught another 15 passes yesterday. Tyrone Tracy, they had a really nice run. I haven't seen that speed before. Now, maybe I've just forgotten from last year or the previous year. He had a nice run. I think he caught at least one, if not two passes. And I think these guys, correct me if I'm wrong, so my first question is, weren't these guys on our second team as far as wide receivers? After practice, spring ball? Spring ball.
That would be correct. Yeah. You were correct. Yeah.
So that's my question then, in terms of why wasn't there some change in the system to utilize these guys?
Well, first of all, let me maybe make a correction. Tyrone Tracy was not here for spring ball. He was already in the portal. But you're correct in saying that.
Well, but why? Okay, but the previous year, I mean, we could have done something maybe to have kept him around. I guess that's my point.
Well, let's not forget he did struggle last year. I don't think Don, you or I will fight that notion. He did struggle last year. He was perceived to be the number one receiver heading into the year. I think the more, if you're going to be critical of Iowa's ability to evaluate talent and utilize talent, get the most out of your talent, specifically at skill position spots, it's with Charlie Jones, who's absolutely lighting it up. And you can say, well,
right.
He did this against Indiana State. No, he's done it against Penn State, and now he's done it on the road, seemingly at a pretty good Syracuse team. We'll see how the Orange pan out. That looks like an improved team. I'm with the caller, Don. It is frustrating. I mean, I want to stay positive because Iowa did win 27-0 yesterday. But, Pat, I think you bring up a fair point. Don, we haven't really talked a whole lot about Charlie Jones, but how do you react when you see Charlie doing what he's doing?
Well, first off, I think I can easily say that I'm not surprised because I know you've had me on the air mentioning that, in my personal opinion, Charlie Jones was our most reliable receiver last year. And I think the coaches, in their defense, maybe they didn't give Charlie more snaps because they wanted to protect him to be the all Big Ten kick returner, punt returner that he was. At least punt returner. Didn't he return both kicks and punts, as I recall?
Yes.
I believe he did both. Did both very well. So maybe that's one reason they gave him fewer snaps than a couple of other receivers a year ago. But obviously that probably concerned Charlie because he'd like to play a bigger role wherever he might be playing. And, of course, he is playing the bigger role at Purdue and playing it well.
But what bothers me about that is I'm just afraid, and Corey, you've mentioned this before several times, I believe. I'm just afraid that are we going to be able to keep guys like this in the future, like Tegan Johnson and et cetera, and also bring guys like this into the system when they see something like this happen? I think that could be a problem.
Well, and let me throw a compliment in there for the Iowa coaching staff. I've been critical of their ability to evaluate talent, specifically at quarterback, and I stand by that. But I also think some of this is an indicator, and I know Charlie is just one example, but some of this is an indicator, Pat, that perhaps our problem is not evaluating talent at high school. It's developing and utilizing that talent. Because obviously Iowa was one of the few programs that was interested in Charlie Jones out of Buffalo. So they made a good decision in getting him here.
That's true.
But never really got his full potential, Don. Is that fair?
I think that's a fair argument. Yeah.
So Pat, I mean, yeah, I'm with you. I'm concerned about it, especially with the transfer portal and with NIL. But I also think that's an excuse. I mean, if we're going to, what I foresee happening is if guys start leaving, and I'm not predicting that, but you made a fair point. This offense has to get a whole lot better to make it attractive for any quarterback or any wide receiver as far as showcasing, an explosive player's skill set. What I foresee happening is people blaming NIL and the transfer portal because it's already happened. And Pat, you remember back in the spring when Charlie Jones left, there were a lot of people who fell back on, well, he wasn't going to play. Well, maybe he wouldn't have played, Pat, but if he wouldn't have played here, shame on us. Because,
That's right.
I don't care. Listen, I like Keegan Johnson. I think he's got great potential. Same with Arlen Bruce. I liked some of what I saw from Brody Brecht yesterday. He's really raw. But Charlie Jones is our best receiver. And I don't know how you could possibly argue that when you see what he's doing at Purdue. And he doesn't drop passes. I don't know what his drop rate is, but it's very low. He's got good speed. And then you combine that with what he gives on special teams. He is will be interested to see. And I don't follow transfer portal rankings, Pat, but I would be interested to see in all of college football, when we look back at the 2022 transfer portal cycle, Charlie Jones may end up being one of the top 5 transfers in all of college football when we look back at this season.
I would think he would be. I think he leads all receivers, I think, in the country for pass receptions, I believe.
And again, they have
he made almost a brilliant. He made two brilliant. Well, one almost brilliant catch. It was a ball that he really shouldn't have caught, but I mean, he made a diving catch. He was sprinting down the sidelines, made a diving catch, and the only thing that happened is when he hit the ground, he dropped the ball. But then he made a beautiful catch on the sidelines, which just was fantastic.
Well, and let me just read the stat lines for everybody's not. And I know some people don't like us talking about this, Don, but I think it's more than fair that we're bringing it up because it's happening. And by the way, I wish the best for Charlie Jones. I'm not a person who says, well, he left and I don't like when he left, so I'm gonna wish him, I'm gonna wish him ill. No, that's just not how I look at this.
That's why I watch the Purdue games.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want him to do really well.
I have no issue with him when he left or how he left or why he left. But here are his numbers: Penn State at home, 12 catches, 153 yards, 3 kick returns for 43 yards, a touchdown through the air. Purdue at Indiana State, he had 9 catches, 133 yards, 3 touchdowns through the air. At Syracuse yesterday, 11 catches, 188 yards, and 1 touchdown. I mean, those are Don.
Let's not forget he only played the first half against Indiana State.
Yes, he did that. He did that in the first half.
Yeah.
And I know the apologists will say, well, Purdue, all they do is throw, and then people love to fall back on, but they lost. What difference does that make? We're talking about him showcasing his talent and how Iowa is not an attractive place for wide receivers to play and why Purdue is and why Iowa could have issues moving forward with attracting or keeping guys who want to showcase their skills. That's why he's showcasing his skills. If Purdue goes 2 for 10, but he, ends up winning whatever the wide receiver of the year award is in the country, he's going to get drafted. Regardless of his measurables, he's going to have a good shot at earning a spot in the league. And I mean, based on what we saw last year from Charlie at wide receiver, I don't think he would have gotten that shot, even despite the fact that he's a tremendous special teamer. And Don, I think Charlie Jones showed some intelligence by acknowledging the fact that, hey, I need more than just being a great punt and kick returner, because you and I both know the onus or the importance on returning kicks and returning punts that has been diminished in recent years, just with the change in the game and rules, of course, the touchback rules, the fair catch rules. Right. So Pat, and I know that's a long answer, but I don't blame Charlie for any of it. And I agree with everything you said. I think it's a concern moving forward for Iowa because of the circumstances to be able to not only recruit at that position, which they're struggling to do right now at wide receiver, struggling mightily at wide receiver in the recruiting ranks, but also keeping guys that have been developed, but maybe not their potential not fully seen.
And Corey, I do recall.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, Coach. Go ahead.
I just was going to mention to Corey, I do recall the conversation we had, maybe on the air, maybe not. I can't recall that. But I remember acknowledging, I agree with you, Corey. The freshman receivers have really, really bright futures. But to be honest with you, I wish Charlie Jones had more snaps and the freshmen had a few less. I did say that, and turns out I think I was right.
Then I just had a few quick questions. I wondered why we don't pass more over the middle. It seems like, that we throw so many tough passes to the side, which I believe is the most difficult pass for a quarterback. And it just doesn't seem like I know we throw over the middle occasionally, but it just seems to me like there's much more of an opportunity to throw a pass right over the middle, and it's a quicker release kind of thing. And we just don't seem to do much of that. And I'd just like to get your comments on that.
I'd be happy to answer that one, Corey.
Sure.
The bottom line, when you throw the ball over the middle of the field, one thing you absolutely must be concerned about is overthrows. An overthrow to the outside of the field goes off the field. An overthrow in the middle of the field ends up in the wrong hands too many times to count. So that's part of our concern.
The point I wanted to make is you throw it to the sidelines, and if that's intercepted, that's a touchdown. That's 6 points the other way. So if it's
overthrown, it's going to be caught by the coaching staff and not by a defender.
What?
If it's overthrown on the sideline, it's caught by one of the players on the bench or one of the coaches. If it's overthrown toward the middle of the field between the hashes, it's likely to end up in the hands of one of those safeties.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The other thing is I don't know if Spencer has he pump faked at all this year? I'd love to see that in the quarter. Now you could say, well, he doesn't have much time, but it takes just a half second, if that, to pump fake. And I don't know if he's ever done that. Maybe I've missed that, but I sure wish he would do some of that occasionally.
Let me mention one thing about double cuts, because one of the notes I made to myself is number 3 for us should get ready, because he's doing such a great job of aggressively breaking on short routes. It's just a matter of time before they try to double cut him. He should be ready for that. That should be happening next, because Cooper's done a great job of breaking on the short throws. As you know, he had a really nice interception last night, and of course, another one that should have been intercepted too. So he just needs to be prepared for what's going to happen next. People are going to try to double cut him if he's playing corner. And even if he's playing an inside defender position, there is the route he breaks on. If it's an inside receiver, what you might call a flat route or a stick route, imagine an inside receiver breaking outside a short route, a 6-8 yard route, and then flashing his hands. And those are the exact kind of routes that Cooper's been able to undercut, right? But then from there, it's simply flat and go. In other words, he nods outside and then bends back toward the middle of the field. And typically, if our defense is like a lot of defenses, it'll be 2 high safeties. And of course, that double cut from an inside position ends up between those 2 deep safeties. So that's just something for Cooper to be aware of. People are going to try to double cut him, whether he's lined up outside as a corner or inside as a nickelback.
Yeah, I love that. I love a pump fake to somebody that goes out and stops quickly, and then just takes off downfield. Then you can just lob the ball downfield for a long pass opportunity. So that's as a quarterback fan, that's one of the things I've always loved. I've watched college football for 70 years now. So anyway, my final question is, and this is just a wild question, but even when Tim Dwight was playing, I often thought about, now we of course got someone like Terry Roberts, some people with guys with speed like that. I often wonder why we don't, if we're having a difficult time rushing a passer or rushing a quarterback, why we don't have some guy like that at the line that could also drop back to play defensive back, but he also could blitz. And if you have that kind of speed, it seems to me like we could get some more quarterback sacks. And I just want to throw that out as a possibility.
Well, one thing a lot of people use, talking about using a more skilled athlete to be a pass rusher, if the ball's on the hash, just imagine that short side corner that's lined up into the boundary. He's still not that far from the ball. The ball, of course, being snapped on the hash. And if you disguise it well and hit that snap count just right, sometimes that can end up being a free rusher. And, of course, the quarterback's job is to keep an eye on that short side corner, because he's not that far removed. And the other possibility would be what I call a nub formation. Nub formation simply means there is nothing outside of the tight end. In the case of a heavy formation to the right, the nub side might be a guard, a tackle, and a tight end, and nobody wider than a tight end. Obviously, that flat defender that's out there, he's very nearby, and we have to account for him at all times too. That was one of the simple advantages of a stand-up tight end, is that it was easy for the tight end to eyeball that guy and to know he was coming before he came. You could simply follow his cues a little bit easier if you're standing up looking at him.
Yeah,
in the days of the stand-up tight end, the tight end was another set of eyes to the quarterback. That's how we used him. It was very effective in being able to do that. It gave the quarterback extra insurance for stunts to that side of the field.
Yeah, I remember. I always loved that Hayden had that, and so that's one thing I wish Kirk would have kept. For sure, another thing he would have kept of Hayden's time. Anyway, my last question that wasn't my last question. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the show, because I lost my best friend a couple of months ago, and we were both Iowa alums, and we would talk. He was about 5 hours from me, but we would always talk after every game and analyze the game and watch the replay and talk again. And so I really appreciate this, because this is how I can get some feedback and still learn about football, and just really appreciate it. It means a lot. So thank you.
Pat, I'm sorry to hear about your loss, and I appreciate you calling in, and you're free to call in whenever we're live.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. Have a great night. And I want to address the comment from Hawkeye Guy, and I appreciate Hawkeye Guy being here. I'm not trying to pick on you, sir. But he says, what would you rather, have a winning record with the Hawkeyes or awesome stats and a losing record with Purdue? I want to make clear, Don, that the reason we bring up, I think you and I are on the same page, the reason we bring up Charlie Jones is not to talk about which team is better. It's got nothing to do with that. we're talking about Iowa's ability or lack thereof, and you make the conclusion based on what we see on the field. Iowa's ability or lack thereof to get the most out of talent on offense. And if you're upset about Iowa's inability to push the ball downfield and put up big numbers and take this program to the next level, which I think all of us believe it can achieve based on what we see on defense and special teams, if you're frustrated with the offense, this is an aspect of something that needs to change. In my opinion, you need to be able to figure out a way to get all of, or at least most of what you have with your best players. And I think Charlie Jones was, if there's any question, I don't really know what we're arguing here, because I don't think there's any question Charlie Jones, in hindsight, was probably one of Iowa's best players. So yes, if we're talking about just being a fan, I would rather win more games, but that's not the discussion. We're talking about Iowa's ability to improve this offense, and that's an aspect that fans are frustrated with. That Pat brings it up. We've had a lot of people bring it up, and I know people get tired of talking about Charlie Jones. I enjoyed looking at Charlie Jones' stats, Don, because he is a former Hawkeye. Just like I enjoyed watching Jake Rudock win in 2015 at Michigan. I had nothing against Jake Rudock. I was happy to see him perform well at Michigan, get a shot in the NFL, and I wish the best for pretty much any former Hawkeye. Harpo, thank you for the super chat, Harpo. Charlie Jones played himself into the NFL. Enjoy the show, Corey. Darren Meyer has a question for you, Don. What do you think about bringing Scott Frost in as our OC? First of all, the position's not available right now, Darren, as you know. But I get it's a hypothetical question. I've had several people bring this up to me over the past week, Don. There is no way in this world that Scott Frost and Kirk Ferentz would ever mesh. Am I right?
I can't see it happening. And frankly, if I was putting together a list, Scott Frost would not be that high on my list.
John, good to meet you at the game as well. He says, would Coach Don make a change at quarterback? It's a good question, Don.
Well, here's one of my disappointments from last night. And, of course, I stayed up to watch the fourth quarter. And what time was it then? It was 1 o'clock or later. And the thing that bothered me, we played a lot of backup players, and I was thrilled to see that. Example, TJ Hall got in, I believe, the last two possessions on defense. And I was just happy for all those backup players that were out there playing, because they deserve to play. They work hard, and this is a great opportunity to get their feet wet, and we did that, except I couldn't help but notice our second-team quarterback took no snaps, and obviously our third-teamer didn't either. And I just found myself wondering, why not? And for that matter, even if Spencer was head and shoulders our best quarterback, then why would we have him in the game late in the game risking injury, if that were the case? So I was just confused about why Padilla in particular didn't get some snaps, and for that matter, maybe our third teamer would get a series of downs too at the end of the game, just to get his feet wet. Obviously the way the season has started, we don't have any guarantees about how many games will be settled in the third quarter. We don't know how often that's going to happen, but it certainly happened last night. We were up 20-0 at the end of 3, and it was safe to say, you've already heard me say, I was expecting a shutout because we were that dominant on defense, and of course our kicking game was superior too. And I just felt and on top of that, Nevada was struggling with their offense, and I didn't see any way they were going to score on us, so it would have been an easy opportunity to have all kinds of second and third team players get on the field.
It's exactly what D. Chown brings up here, Don. Why do you think Padilla wasn't put into the game during garbage time when we clearly had the game won? And the thing is, Don, I think the reasoning, I don't think this question was even posed to Kirk in the post-game press conference. And I'll give the media a pass on that one, Don, because they were also, waiting through that 7-hour delay or 7-hour game. But I think my guess is that Kirk may reason that we felt Spencer needed to build some confidence late in the game. But the problem with that notion, and I'm assuming that's what Kirk would say, the problem to me with that notion is Spencer wasn't throwing the ball anyways. He's just handing the ball off. So why not get Joey Labus? I mean, you can put Alex Padilla out there, but I don't even know that really does anything unless you're going to run some pass plays for him. Why not get Joey Labus out there at least to be able to play? I know there weren't a lot of fans there, but an actual game against someone else, just get the kid out there. I don't understand what the harm in that. You're up 27-0. Even if he were to fumble a snap and it's returned for a touchdown, I just don't understand what the purpose of keeping Spencer out there. And if you really do believe Spencer is your I think it's clear. Kirk Ferentz absolutely believes Spencer Petras is their best option. Why risk him getting hurt in some way, some freak accident late in the game?
Right. And as you know, we've always referred to the magic number is 17, meaning if you have a 17-point lead, of course, we had that at halftime, didn't we, come to think of it? A 17-point lead is pretty safe because it requires 3 scores by the other team to even tie you up. Can't do it with 2 scores. 2 scores, of course, could only be 16. So we had a really safe lead. Of course, the defense would have been upset if the backups gave up a touchdown, but let's face it, it's not the end of the world if the backups give up a touchdown. As long as they gain good experience, we certainly don't want to give up any points, but the starting defense can know that touchdown is on our name, if you will, but we weren't out there playing, and it's easy for them to believe if we were playing the entire game, we would have shut them out rather than giving up that 1 score.
And we do have a caller. We're going to put him on hold and get to that call here in just a moment. And we're going to dive more into quarterback because I want to look at the numbers from yesterday and get Don's take as a former quarterbacks coach on Spencer Petras' performance against the likes of the Nevada defense. So we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. More with Coach Patterson here on Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson.
You may have heard of the real-life Hawkeye man cave known as Kinnick Under the Kitchen. Well, after lots of hard work, there's not much space left to paint, but the walls are exploding out for public consumption. Under the Kitchen is proud to announce that you can now purchase exclusive prints of some of your favorite Hawkeye legends, including wrestling great Spencer Lee, football players Arlen Bruce, Riley Moss, and Tavian Banks, plus an all-in-one Murray family legacy print featuring Keegan, Chris, and Kenyon Murray himself. Signed and unsigned prints are available, making the perfect collectible or gift for any Hawkeye enthusiast. For more information on purchasing one of these outstanding Hawkeye prints, visit Under the Kitchen on Facebook. That's Under the Kitchen on Facebook.
So appreciate Under the Kitchen and print of a guy you know very well, Tavian Banks. And anyways, we appreciate Under the Kitchen sponsoring and their continued support. So great stuff down at Under the Kitchen. You can find them Under the Kitchen on Facebook. I do want to get to our next caller here who's been on hold. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, who's on the line.
Lomansky on the phone.
Lomansky, how are you, sir?
I'm great. I'm glad I stayed up because I got to celebrate those players that got in the game late in the game. That meant a lot to me. And Don, I don't think you're ever going to be more than semi-retired. We need you on the recruiting trail. I bet when you saw T.J. Hall come in the game with Xavier, we had people at right guard come in and get a chance to see what they could do. Llewellyn and the defensive line. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing if Coach Parker wanted to play with 10 men, Kirk would probably look at Coach Parker and give him a look and then say, okay, Coach Parker, it's your deal. I won't interfere. So I appreciate, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think Parker has total say on that. And on the offensive side, I don't have a clue. And I was kind of looking at for the offensive side of the ball, but maybe I should compliment their trying people at right guard. The thing we don't talk much about and I'm guilty of it, I focused with Corey most of my comments on getting people on the field on the offensive side of the ball, but we haven't talked about the turnover ratio, how that helped Iowa last year. We're all in close games last year. We're going to need that this year, where our defense is holding opponents to 4.5 approximately points per game. So maybe you want to comment a little further on a turnover game, and maybe kudos to Coach Parker for getting people on the field and recruiting well, and maybe how good is this defense? I'm going back in time, like who to compare this defense to. I'll be quiet here and listen to your comments, both of you.
Don, you take that first.
Sure. I'm glad you brought up turnover margin because one of I would say the number one accomplishment we had last night was to play all night long without turning the ball over. I know that meant a lot to Kirk to be able to do that because, Corey, if I'm not mistaken, Nevada was leading college football FBS schools in turnovers. I think they had 11 so far as I recall. We played all night without a turnover. We were only +1. We only had one as a defense, but it +1 beats the heck out of -1. So that was a good sign that we were able to protect the ball all night and play without a turnover.
And then what was your other question, Lemansky, about you say who would I compare the defense to?
Well, it just seems I'm trying to go back and see, on going back historically, how good this defense is. You get Xavier to commit to Iowa. You've got TJ Hall come from California. They both get on the field in the first 3 games, which I think the Iowa staff, I guess I can understand it. Let's not put people on the field that make mistakes. But here you got young players on the defensive side seeing the field more than the offensive side. So is this the best defense we put on the field for how long? I'm not sure, but I think it's right up there.
Yeah, I think it's hard collectively. I mean, we'll look back at this later. We haven't played good enough competition to make that declaration yet, Lemansky, as you know. But I would say that I think the defensive line might be the deepest we've seen in the Kirk Ferentz era. Because really, I've said this several times. I think we've seen a shift in philosophy with developing depth along that defensive line since Kelvin Bell took over along that defensive line, and maybe even when Phil Parker took over the defense as a whole. I think you saw last night. Now, again, I understand not playing Noah Shannon late, and there's no reason to risk some of those guys' health. I thought it was a good idea to play Chris Reams and, again, Aaron Graves. We saw Jeremiah Pittman get out there, big number 55. So I think they're deeper there. I still think that teams haven't tested us over the top yet as much as they will and as they should, because Riley Moss, I still think, has yet to prove that he can consistently cover deep down the field. Now, I give him credit. The Iowa State game, Xavier Hutchinson, I don't think he hit 100 yards. I don't know how many catches he had, and those weren't all against Riley.
He had 99.
Okay. So, but again, I didn't think, and Xavier, the thing about Xavier Hutchinson, Don, is he's not an over-the-top guy typically. He's more of a Devontae Adams type receiver who's going to run really crisp routes, make yards after the catch. When Iowa goes up against the likes, I'm trying to think of the next guy on the schedule. I'm sure Michigan's got a guy. Without even looking.
Ohio State's got a couple too.
No, Ohio State's got a couple, and I think Purdue's got one or two.
Yeah, I think they do. I think that I don't think we'll know what we need to know until October 22nd. By then, of course, we would have played Michigan, and we would have played Illinois, and Illinois incidentally has a running back that hits home runs. I'm not sure about the receiving core, but then the ultimate test, of course, will be Ohio State.
The line, but one thing, Lansky, you're right. The linebacking core, between the linebacking core, that front seven might have a chance of being one of the best of the Phil Parker era, no question about it. I still got some question marks about the secondary, but no, it's going to be. There's no question. It's probably in line to be a top 5 or 6 of the Kirk era. We'll see. It might be better than that.
Just a quick look ahead. I looked ahead to Rutgers a little bit. First downs, they made 40 in 3 games and 19 via the pass. So we're going to learn a lot about the Iowa defense, if they can, what they can do against a successful running program early in the year. And if they go up in the air with Corey, we'll learn a little bit about our defense against the pass. I think it's going to be interesting. I think Iowa's got a good shot at Rutgers. I respect your not taking Rutgers lightly, Corey, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say we're going to win that football game if we don't turn the ball over and win that game because of our elite defense. And I'll hang up and listen to the rest of the show.
Thanks, Lemansky. I think that game, Don, that game next week, and we can spend the last few minutes here. We got about 40 more minutes here on the show. We can talk about that Rutgers game, first Big Ten game of the year. That's a nerve-wracking game for me, Don, because as you know, Greg Schiano knows how to coach defense.
Yes,
they are 3-0. All right, and I know they struggled with Temple, but they won at Boston College. Was it at Boston College? They beat Boston College week 1. It's going to be a low-scoring game. Like, Iowa's not going to come in there. I'll be shocked if Iowa goes in there and, scores 30.
When you look at the two teams, Corey, you have to say which unit is stronger. Our defense is stronger than our offense at this point in time. That's probably not going to change. And without question, Rutgers' defense is stronger than their offense too. So you got strength against strength in terms of, I shouldn't say it that way. The defense is on paper at least outshining their offense. I think it will be a low-scoring game. And our listeners may not be aware, but Rutgers just put up 16 points without scoring an offensive touchdown. A lot of people aren't aware of that, but that's what happened yesterday.
Let's get to it. We've got a caller on hold, and we've got Alex who's waiting in the queue. Let's get to Alex first. Alex, good to see you again. Second straight day. How you doing, sir?
Good. I thought it'd be a lot sicker. You sound pretty under the weather with all that rain. But no, doing sick. You sound a little like congested, a little.
You know what? Let me just tell you why that is. I actually, and I'll be honest about this. I forgot to take my allergy pill last night. That's honestly the only reason. And I'm a little down on sleep. I don't think I'm sick.
I unfortunately missed we got home and I was thinking they're not going to play this game. And so I fell asleep and then I woke up to find they finished the game. So I, like Don, haven't been able to watch the last, half of the game, but saw some highlights. So I guess that's good enough.
And you were able to take your son for his first, was that his first game you said yesterday?
That was his first game. Obviously wish it could have gone a little differently. Having
what a first game experience.
Yeah, he got his first stadium hot dog, experienced the IOWA. We were the A, so he had some fun with that. So a lot of and I told him he was talking about oh, people around us are nice. I'm like, yeah, if you're wearing the right clothes, people are nice. So he had some fun with that. So
that's great. Alex, what'd you think of Spencer yesterday? That seems to be we've turned the show and that's a hot topic in the chat right now.
Well, it's one of those things where Don or Corey, you guys Bears fans at all?
Don follows.
I used to be, but not anymore.
Well, I'm a Bears fan, and I don't follow NFL too much, but it was when Jay Cutler was the quarterback for the Bears, and he would have just horrible games, consistently horrible games. And then there was some talks about, hey, we need to bench him. We need to, come next draft, we need to draft a quarterback. And then all of a sudden he'd have the game of his life and everyone's like, okay, he's fine. And then he'd kind of regress back to where he was. I feel like this is kind of where we're at, where Spencer Petras had a decent game. I don't think he was great by any stretch of the imagination, but he had a solid game. But you got to look at the level of competition. And I'm not drinking the Spencer Petras Kool-Aid and saying, okay, he's our quarterback. I still have my reservations. I think having Nico Organy and Keegan Johnson back in the fold, I think boosts his confidence level because we saw a lot more shots down the field. Now, I think that's obviously with, again, level of competition. Rutgers is much better defense. That Boston College team that Rutgers beat in Boston College week 1 is actually not turned out to be a great Boston College team. So,
but it is the only reason I bring it up is they are 3-0. They've won 3 games and haven't given up points to really anybody.
No, and so yeah, I think Don Patterson has hit the nail on the head. I mean, we're two very similar teams with struggling offenses and pretty good defenses. So it'd be I bet the under. I think Iowa will be able to produce something on offense with Keegan Johnson and Nico Organy back, and then Caleb Johnson, that freshman running back. I know we saw him a little bit against South Dakota State and Iowa State, and he didn't look great, but this game he looked pretty good. And I don't know if that's, again, you got to take it with a grain of salt because of the level of competition that they were up against. So, credit to them getting the win, and I think maybe they added some new wrinkles to the offense with those 2 wide receivers back. So, and I was actually nice to see Drew Stevenson out there too. That was the other point I saw when he kicked that 47, the first field goal. They said Drew Stevens they didn't put in Alex Blum. Aaron, yeah. So it was kind of, so I think maybe they found their place kicker, which is kind of nice. I know you have been kind of preaching and wanting them to make that change, and I think it's a good change. Even in the driving rain, he put it right down the middle, and we were on south end zone just to the right of it, and it looked really good from where we were sitting. So, and
I know hindsight's 20/20, but doesn't that, Alex, make you wonder what would have happened last week with that 48-yarder in the rain?
A little bit, but I came on the show after that, and I said I'm kind of glad we lost, because it was just, when you win,
I understand.
you can kind of gloss over a lot of your blemishes because you won. With a loss, it's a lot harder to do that. So I think this next game, I know we go against Michigan the very next week after Rutgers, and at the start of the season I was pretty hopeful. That one I'm kind of gritting my teeth a little bit on that. I think at Illinois, I think it's the next game after Michigan. Then we're on a bye week, then Ohio State. I think the Rutgers and the Illinois game are going to be a real good test of this offense. If this game it's just because the level of competition isn't that good, or hey, maybe because of the returning of Keegan Johnson and Nico Reganian, maybe the breakout of Caleb Johnson in this game, boosts Spencer's confidence and everything. So I don't know. He looked very uncomfortable when he was rolling out though too. That's just kind of what my observation was on that.
Don, your thoughts on that?
Well, one thing. Let me address the kicking game a little bit. I never knew much about place kicking, but this much I did know as a head coach. I simply reminded our guys, if the ball doesn't go right down the middle, I'm talking primarily about PATs, of course, because you're able to judge how you're kicking because you have more PATs than field goal attempts in general. And I said, even on those PATs, it's only a 20-yard kick. I want you to be really super critical if you don't put the ball down the middle. I mean, we have that expression, split the uprights. We have that expression for a reason. Maybe some old coach invented it because he wanted to be sure that those long field goals had a better chance to go through. And I couldn't help but notice that Stevens seems to take that to heart. He tends to split the uprights. The ball seems to be pretty much down the middle. And that's what you want to see. I had an All-American kicker at Western Illinois. That's precisely what he did. And for that reason alone, he very seldom missed. From 55 yards, he might miss because obviously less margin for error when you get that far away from the uprights. So I'm excited about him showing that he's our kicker. And you bring up a good point. Is it Alex? Is that right?
Yes.
Alex? Yeah. You bring up a good point, or maybe Corey, you did, but without the missed field goal against Iowa State, maybe we wouldn't have seen Stevens. And let's face it, that was a difficult situation for any young kicker to try to kick a ball late in the game when the playing conditions were not good and it was going to put the game into overtime. That's a difficult assignment for anyone. And it wouldn't have been, a lot of people would argue, it wouldn't have been fair at all to put Stevens out there for that to be his first college kick. But having seen Stevens a little bit now, I'm thinking maybe he would have made it. We'll never know. But frankly, maybe he wouldn't have started the game as the place kicker last night were it not for those, especially that miss at the end of the Iowa State game, because obviously that was a key miss. Difficult assignment to make it, no doubt. But still, that's why we put you out there, is to make the play.
Yeah. And one more thing before I got to get off. I do have to work at 2:30 in the morning, so that's coming pretty quick. But I just wanted to pop on and say hi. Get on to I think the last couple times I was on, Don wasn't on, so it's kind of nice to have him there. So, but last thing, one thing I actually noticed, and I kind of went back at the play-by-play and the scoring drive. The only time Iowa scored a touchdown was when they were on. I think they had less than 60 yards to go, and when they got the two field goals, one of them they started deep inside their own territory, which is nice. They were able to move the ball, but I think if Iowa's offense cannot move the ball when they're deep in their territory, I think that could be a problem going forward. So I don't know if you guys had anything to say on that, but again, thanks for taking my call, and I'll probably stay on for the last half hour for you guys, and I'll hopefully see you guys next week with a Iowa win over Rutgers.
Appreciate you, Alex. Have a great week.
Sounds great. I do believe, Corey, the first two touchdown drives, I believe, were both less than 50 yards. I think we started on the 46 one time and maybe on the 40 the next. And we don't have to apologize, of course, for having good field position. We simply need to continue to take advantage of it with touchdowns.
Before we get to our next caller, I appreciate our caller who's on the phone line waiting on hold, and we got about a half an hour left, as Alex alluded to. I want to just actually look at, and I don't want this. This is not going to be a hate fest on the quarterback room. We've been critical of Spencer Petras. I've been more critical than a lot of people, but I think in large part, Iowa fans have wanted a change. We have not seen a change. That's been Kirk's prerogative. But you look at Spencer's numbers yesterday. 14 to 26, 175 yards, 1 touchdown. It's fair. It's a fair point to make, Don, that this is not a good Nevada defense. This is I think they were ranked around 100 in total defense. They gave up 55 to an FCS opponent the week prior. Gave up over 600 yards to Incarnate Word that same game. Again, not taking anything away from Spencer, but that is a fact. I have a couple notes here about Spencer because I saw some people on social media yesterday who said that there's no way anybody could be critical of Spencer's performance last night. Don, you and I know it's not fair to any player to say that because there's always things that players at any position can improve upon, and they're going to look back on tape. I will say this about Spencer. He looked more comfortable stepping into his throws last night. I thought you talk about, again, not being a QB guru, but from what I've learned, especially from you, with Spencer's biggest issues of stepping into his throws and shifting his weight to his front foot, it seemed like he did a better job of that. I still see some ball placement issues, and that's maybe my biggest concern is, somebody made a comment too. I don't know who this was. I think it was a media member, actually. Somebody made the comment, the accuracy that Spencer's throwing with tonight, that doesn't, basically, it doesn't matter who the competition is. That translates to any setting. And that's just not true, Don, right? I mean, there's also the mental aspect of things. And I'm not trying to say that Spencer would have played badly if it was Michigan or Rutgers in there last night. But I do think Spencer has proven that he has all the tools in the toolbox in practice, fundamentally. We keep hearing that. And we've seen him even in kids' practice. He looked really good at Kids' Day. Ball placement, though, continues to be a concern. Did you see that yesterday? I know he made a few nice deep throws. I think Brody Brecht probably will learn how to track the ball better. A couple of those throws, would you agree that Brody probably needs to learn how to track the ball better?
It's difficult to say. It seemed like on those deep throws, the ball was a little bit over the outside shoulder.
Right.
And it's hard to know if he misjudged it or if the ball simply was thrown a little bit wider than it should have been. It was still catchable. I think the receivers in general didn't do a great job of adjusting the ball downfield. Our young receiver, I can't remember his name, but there was a route, a post route deep downfield, and he clearly misjudged the ball a little bit. The wind, I'm sure, might have been a little bit tricky. It's not easy to judge a long pass. Here's one of my disappointments. You'll remember the play for sure. They were lined up with the slot formation to the left side of the field, and the inside receiver was Reganey, and they were playing us what we call man free. Simply means there's a deep defender that is responsible for covering the field, but the inside receiver, the defender on him lined up with inside leverage, such as to take away a slant inside. And we did throw slants for the first time. I was glad we did. We didn't throw them great, but we hit a couple of them, and at least it demonstrated we recognized that maybe that's a good alternative, especially versus man free. Here's my point on that particular play. Receiver selection in general, I think, was pretty good. The example I'm giving you, and you remember the play, Corey, Spencer identified the right receiver to go to. It was Reganey, the slot receiver, because his man coverage was lined up inside of him, and there was nobody on what we call a Vegas route. It's simply an inside fade, if you can imagine. He drove down the field. He had outside leverage on the defender, and he faded away from the free safety. The free safety was controlled because Spencer did look off for a split second. That was all good. The only negative with all that is the ball was overthrown. And Reganey had won on that Vegas route fairly easily. And you've heard me say the worst thing to do with the deep ball is to overthrow a receiver that's open. I'd rather you underthrow it a little bit because we still may get it, or at least we might get a foul. But if it's overthrown, of course, it's just one big disappointment. That's an example. Reganey did everything he could to get to the ball. It wasn't overthrown by much, but it was overthrown.
And that was a touchdown.
It was a touchdown, yes. So that's one that got away. And the reason I bring it up, for you to beat a good team like Michigan or Ohio State, you can't miss on those opportunities. You need to be able to hit on all of them.
And just a few notes. And again, I want to acknowledge it first before I give some criticism here. That I do say it again. Spencer Petras, I thought, looked more comfortable. And he played, I said last night on my show, I thought he played okay, Don. I didn't think he was sensational like some people were trying to portray him. I thought he played okay.
It was his best game of the year.
Absolutely. However, the standard is has not been set very high.
Right.
To break that, that's just again not trying to be overly critical. Keegan Johnson, he drew a pass interference in the first quarter on a ball that was slightly underthrown, not egregiously underthrown, but you know what play I'm talking about, Don. You brought up the Nico Reganey overthrow in the end zone. What about the throw to Arlen Bruce for the touchdown? That looked like it was going to be overthrown. That was a heck of a catch, kind of a Willie Mays type catch by Arlen Bruce.
Well, again, you got a guy that's what we might classify as wide open. So that's a good time for a more conservative throw. It was a circus catch by Arlen Bruce. I don't know what else you can call it. So Arlen took him off the hook that time. It would have been another tragedy to have overthrown him, of course, and that ball was almost overthrown.
And how about the throw after the long delay? And this one, I will be critical to Spencer. It probably should have been an interception. It was underthrown. Nico just fought for the ball through the defender and made a play. But that probably should have been an interception. That was not a good throw by Spencer.
That was an incredible play by Nico. 46-yard gain that appeared to be on its way to an interception.
And, he had a 3rd and 11 pass in the third on it looked like a simple crossing route that he just threw well behind Sam Laporta and that's a critical down, a missed throw and a critical down that was past the sticks. So I don't bring these up to pick on Spencer, but I just when the notion that people, and I'm not saying anybody in the chat has said that, but people on social media, including some in the media, that fans shouldn't be critical of Spencer after last night. We've been critical at times of the defense. We've acknowledged at times, Don, that especially last year that Iowa gave up too many first quarter touchdowns. But that doesn't take away from the fact that the defense was really good, and it doesn't take away from the fact that I thought Spencer was improved yesterday.
One reason our defense is good is because we set the bar incredibly high. You're not going to accomplish great things unless you have high expectations.
Okay, let's get to our next caller who's on hold. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, who's on the line. Caller, can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you.
Hello.
Hello. How's it going? This is Erica Goldberg.
Hey, Erica. How are you?
Good. How are you guys tonight?
A little tired, Don. We're
doing better since Erica called up.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice. I just have a few bullet points I wanted to run through. I've been kind of taking some notes here. I'll start with Arlen Bruce. I said in the chat, and you guys just brought him up, so I'll go on with that. I think that people don't give him enough credit. I think he's going to play on Sundays if we develop him properly, and I just wanted to see what you guys thought of that.
He's a little undersized, Don, but Rondale Moore is, I don't know what his role with the Cardinals is, but certainly he overcame lack of size. Your thoughts on Arlen Bruce's potential? He has been a warrior despite, he's been really the only healthy scholarship player throughout all of this, and I agree with Erica. He's played well.
Yeah, you're right. His size is going to be a definite negative with the NFL. But the plus, of course, is he does have good special teams value. He's a very reliable fielder on punt. Of course, he's got some escapability in terms of returning punts or kicks. So he has a chance, but he's going to have to continue to develop and be one of those undersized receivers that never has a drop. Let's not forget that Tim Dwight played well in the NFL too, and there are some similarities there.
America?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I think it's behind again. I don't know why it's doing that. Did that last
you're
week
good.
too.
You're good.
Another point I wrote down. So we were having a chat. We were talking about Bob Stoops and future, possible OCs or head coaches at Iowa. One thing I wrote down, and I know this might sound crazy, but I just thought of this, and the Epinezas have such a legacy at Iowa, and we know that Epi is actually a coach in Edwardsville here in Illinois. I was wondering if you guys think it would be useful for him to come in some context, perhaps.
I don't know much about Epi, Don. What do you know about Epi?
Well, I remember him as a player, certainly, and he's a wonderful father. AJ Epinesa is an example to prove that he's a wonderful father because AJ was raised the right way, and Epi has a son on the team right now, and he's persevering. He's a young player, a recruited walk-on, and and it wouldn't surprise me at all if he ends up earning a scholarship too. But I'm not sure what Erica's question is, whether or not Epi might become a coach.
Is he coaching
Yeah,
some?
he would become a coach in some type of context. Because I know I watched some videos on YouTube because I was talking about AJ Epinesa with somebody, and I think that the Google picked up on it, and since then things have been coming up. And so I watched some videos, and it looks like Epi actually coaches in his hometown of Edwardsville here in Illinois at the high school or something like that. And also, since Coach was saying that he's a good father and everything, I think that in a way part of the coach's job is to be father-esque in certain regards. So that's why I'm starting
Absolutely.
to think, what if we brought him to Iowa in some way, in some capacity?
That's an interesting thought, Don. He's certainly got a passion for Iowa football, and he's going to have, he's got a younger son. Is it Iosi that is a high 4-star recruit, I believe, class of 2024. So that's a valid argument. Now, Epi would not be helping on offense.
No.
Yeah, that's the only problem.
So, I mean, Iowa, Erica, it's not a terrible idea because he's a guy who's got connections to the program. He's obviously coaching at the high school level, and he's got strong roots in Hawkeye football. But as of right now, I don't really think they have any positions. They certainly don't have any positions that I would say are nobody's going to be relieved of their duties, is what I'm saying, based on performance on that side of the ball. Don?
That's right.
Yeah, as you know, Corey, it's difficult for a coach to coach a position other than the one he played, because that's his area of greatest expertise. And there are exceptions, of course. Kirk's a great exception to that. Kirk played linebacker in college, and yet he became a great offensive line coach. But Kirk would tell you it wouldn't have happened except for the fact that he was mentored by Joe Moore, his old high school coach and a great football coach at the University of Pittsburgh. So Epi would tell you, I'm qualified to become a defensive line coach or to be a defensive line coach in college. He would probably tell you in the next breath, I'm not really qualified to do much else, because it is a game that's very specialized from one position to the next.
But by all accounts, just to clarify, by all accounts, Epi Epinesa is a great human being, right, Don? I've never heard anybody say a bad thing about the guy.
No doubt about it.
Are you still with
I
us,
think
Erica?
I'm lagging again. I think I'm lagging. Sorry, guys. I don't know why this
you're
is happening.
You're good.
I just have 2 more quick bullet points. Both of them kind of relate to offense.
Okay.
One thing I noticed last night that was really interesting to me is that there was a lot less emphasis on the tight ends. And I think that's personally because we had the wide receivers, Nico and Keegan were back in. But I was just curious if that was for that reason or if there's another strategic reason why that might be.
Well, Don, I'd like to go back and track how many plays was Sam Laporta lined out wide, because I'd like to you may tell me I'm crazy and that I have no right to say this, Don, but I'd like to scrap that whole concept of running Sam Laporta out wide. I don't really know what the point of that is. If you've got health with your receivers, let's not take away Sam Laporta's strength as a tight end. And I believe was it last night he had they ran a slant play for him as a wide receiver. I just don't quite understand the concept there. I think it was thrown behind him or something. But your thoughts on tight end involvement? We haven't seen. Erica brings up a good point, because it wasn't just last night. How much have we seen from Luke Lachey? Everybody was touting him as people. There were certain, again, people in the media. This is going to be another Hawkinson Fant type of year, and I kind of giggled at that notion because they,
Right.
that it's kind of a. First of all, you're not going to get 2 first-round draft picks. Coming around every year. But just your thoughts on tight end involvement, because of course you coach tight ends for quite a stint at Iowa.
Right. Well, the fact that Reganey, I've got the number of targets here listed at the wide receiver position. Reganey, 4 targets, caught 2 balls for 56 yards. One was along a 46, and certainly that ball had a chance to be intercepted. Reganey did a great job of fighting for the ball. Keegan Johnson had 4 targets for 11 yards. 2 were caught. Brody Breck was targeted 4 times, only 1 completion for 4 yards. Arlen Bruce targeted 4 times also. So we had really good distribution among the wide receivers. And as I recall, I don't have it written down here, but I believe that Sam was targeted 5 times, as I recall. Few yards, a couple of catches for just a few yards. But I can promise you this about Sam. All Sam really cares about is that we won the game. It's not about personal accomplishment for Sam or any number of other players. They recognize that football is the ultimate team sport. All that matters is we get the W. And, of course, they want to contribute as best they can, but they understand there's only one football. And we'd like to believe the football goes to the guy that deserves it the most. And that ties into route running and getting open, of course, but it also ties into down and distance. Maybe you're open on your route, but it's 3rd down and 15. So I'm sorry, we're not going to throw the ball such a short distance because we got to try to find a way to generate a 1st down on this last down. I don't think it's anything to be concerned about. I do agree with Corey, especially as we get back to normal with our collection of wide receivers. I'd like to think that Sam spends more time as an inside receiver because that's his strength, and he certainly took good advantage of those opportunities a year ago, and he's going to do it all over again this year too.
Yeah, that's probably the case. I had a feeling it had to do with the fact that the wide receivers were back in, but I just wanted to see if there was any type of purposeful reason why that was.
No, we think you're right.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think you're exactly right, Erica. It was simply because we had more receivers available that Spencer has confidence in.
Okay. Yeah. All right then. And then the last thing I want to bring up, how can I explain this? So I've said before, I don't remember if I've said it during the call last time I called in, or if I just said it in chat a few times in various after game, discussions like this. But I've noticed that we have, I've brought up that X should play. Maybe we should play him at wide receivers since we were down 2 receivers. And then also they keep saying, the announcers in the game keep saying that Cooper DeJohn was a quarterback in high school. And I'm not going to go ahead and say that we should bring him in as quarterback, although who knows, maybe he's better than Spencer, who knows. But anyway, I'm kind of interested and intrigued by that. I don't know how common that is or not with other teams. I know that we've certainly seen that with the Hawkeyes before, but I was just wondering, since we're struggling offensively and since we're pretty deep defensively, if there's a reason why, besides the fact that Kirk just does, he does what he does and that's it seems like. Is there a reason why we wouldn't consider switching over some of the defensive players who have that offensive experience, or do we want to just not play with what's working well? Or I don't know if you guys have any theories about that one.
Well, I made the comment before. We simply don't know what the personnel group is for a Hail Mary play. I'm talking about a play at the end of the half or a play at the end of the game, a jump ball situation, if you will. It wouldn't shock me if Xavier is the number 1 person in line to be that jumper. If he's the best guy to go up and get a 50-50 ball, it would make sense that you use players both offense and defense for that last snap, a play that has to win the game for you. So it wouldn't surprise me if he is involved, at least from a last play standpoint. He certainly might be.
Mm-hmm.
TJ Hall's another example. Terrence Hall, his dad, was a great receiver for us at Western Illinois. And I know for a fact that TJ has really good hands because he was an accomplished wide receiver in high school. So, again, there's a couple of guys, and you've already mentioned Cooper. Maybe Cooper's skill set's a little bit different. I'll give you an example. If we wanted to maybe we saw someone else that had a unique package for a quarterback that involved, just for the sake of argument, that involved the option game. Is it conceivable against Ohio State if they had shown a vulnerability for option football? Is it conceivable that we could put in Cooper and give him just 3 or 4 plays to run in the game against Ohio State or Michigan, somebody that's going to be difficult to beat? Is it conceivable that we'd have a small package for him? Yeah, that's conceivable. That's called game planning. And we've talked about it before. So it's possible. If Cooper is the best option quarterback on our team and they've shown a vulnerability to that kind of offense, yeah, it's something to consider to be used down the road. But you'd need, of course, several days to prepare to be able to do that on the weekend.
Yeah, I think it would be great actually against a team like Ohio State or Michigan, because certainly they wouldn't be expecting it out of this Iowa team. And so we would be totally shocking them. They'd see them come out in the other position. They wouldn't know how to react to that because they wouldn't have prepared for that. And we need those tricks. We need those
And the catch, of course, it still has to be something we're good at.
Right. And I'll just add this. Let me just add this, Don, too. I don't love the idea of burning Xavier Wampa's red shirt as a gunner.
Good point.
I mean,
we haven't done it yet. Of course, I don't think the rules have changed. I believe you can play in the first 4 games and still be redshirted.
I cannot imagine that they're planning on playing him 4 games and they're going to trot him out for the first 3 games as a gunner, Don.
Well, I'd be very disappointed if we didn't play him even more extensively going forward. And I realize,
where do you play him? You know, if you're not being real creative, Quinn Schulte's playing really good football. I think Kayvon Merriweather, he's a guy I should bring up. I think he's playing the best football of his career right now. And you're not taking Cooper DeJean off the field at cash. I just don't know where he plays.
Let me say this, Corey. We're going to be fortunate if all those guys you just named stay healthy the entire season.
Fair point.
So, you know, a backup is one play away. And, you know, my hope for Xavier would be that he is a really, really confident number 2 player if and when he's in the game. And he might be in the game because of injury to Quinn, or maybe it's simply a case of giving Quinn a break. But if we put him out there in the games in doubt, obviously he's got to play winning football. And I'm sure that at that point in time, he will be able to do that.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, those were the points I had. I had a few other things written down, but I want to give someone else the opportunity to call. So thank you again for taking my call. And everyone, don't forget to like this video and show some support here so that we can continue doing this.
Appreciate your support as always, Erica. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Take care. Always appreciate Erica. She's been with us for a long time on both this channel and our channel with Mark Rogers. So appreciate her support and everyone's support for being here. We got a little over 200 people. Here's what we're going to do, folks. We're approaching the end of our show, but before we get to the end of our show, we are going to talk Iowa Rutgers, kind of an early preview. And Don, I'm sure you're going to be doing more research throughout the week, but we'll kind of give people an idea of what to expect next week in Piscataway. I will say this, early indications are dry conditions in Piscataway next weekend. So pleasant little.
Sure there are a lot of football players that are going to be glad to hear that.
Absolutely. So we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back to finish things off with an early look at Iowa's next opponent, a matchup with the Scarlet Knights.
Hawkeye fans, let's talk about health and performance optimization for a moment. Our sponsor, Ascent Nutrition, offers amazing products. It's actually owned by former Iowa graduate Lance Shuttler. Now, I've decided to partner with Ascent Nutrition because of their unique approach to human health. Ascent offers an organically grown, mold and mycotoxin-free coffee. It provides a pure, clean, and rich flavor without those pesticides that most coffees are treated with. They also offer an algae oil DHA, which is used to support brain health, memory, and focus, as well as proper nervous system development in adults, children, athletes, and even pets. Now, lastly, their unique crafted wild pine pollen is used to support cardiovascular health, hormonal function, and a healthy libido. Your purchase not only supports this channel, but the business of a former Hawkeye. Visit goascentnutrition.com or click the link in the description below and use the code Hawkeyes. That's the code Hawkeyes to receive 15% off your total order from Ascent Nutrition. So if anybody's missing the note there, 15% off now at goascentnutrition.com. So that's been bumped up from 10% off your total order to 15% off your total order. And I'm telling you, this coffee, Don, we don't talk about coffee very often. Are you a coffee drinker?
I am not.
You are not a coffee drinker, man. How'd you get through all the years of no sleep without coffee?
I will admit, I think probably Coke Classic was the solution for me. I'd be drinking a Coke late at night.
Well, you're still with us, so it didn't do you too wrong, Don. All right, let's. I want to before we finish up with Rutgers, let's go rapid fire with these final questions that I had marked. Mitch, interested to hear what Don took away from this game. I'm struggling to see big positives with the offense given the competition we played. Can you give us an overall takeaway from what you saw yesterday, Don? How encouraged were you, or do you agree with me that you really just don't learn a whole lot?
Well, that wasn't the ultimate test, that's for sure. If I had to give a one-word description of the game yesterday, I would use the word progress. I think our quarterback played his best game. Receivers made some nice catches. We've already talked about those that they made. They were balls that were certainly contended by the other team. Nevada had pretty good quarterbacks, so it didn't surprise me that they tested us pretty well. Here's the thing that encouraged me. I think receiver selection was improved by Spencer. A prime example was the Vegas snap that I talked about where he threw the ball deep to Reganey. And that's a pre-snap thing. You see man free. You see the inside leverage. That's the guy you want to go to because it is a home run if and when you hit it. But here's another example. You remember the time we slipped our back out of the backfield on the wheel route, and Spencer was able to recognize that they had dropped the coverage on him, and he hit him. He had a free rusher up in his face, but he very calmly threw the ball. A good throw to the receiver. It was Gavin, wasn't it? And Gavin caught it with plenty of room to run. I think that play was worth about 40 yards, as I recall. It was one of the bigger gainers. Maybe not 40, but certainly 30 something.
Yeah.
It was a good play. So I thought that Spencer played with better poise. We still got sacked 3 times. One time I would say Spencer could have done a better job pre-snap. You remember the snap? I think it was the first sack. He took a short drop. He looked to his left, looking for his favorite tight end, of course, Sam. But Sam was pretty well covered on the wide field at the same time. Both receivers ran slant routes, and the inside receiver was open. So he simply looked to the wrong side on that particular play, as it turned out. And that was a sack, but we held the ball a little bit, and it wasn't entirely the fault of the offensive line. They contributed to it, but when you hold the ball too long, of course, you're either going to have to get sacked or you're going to have to pull it down and go with it. I will talk about this. You remember early in the game, Spencer flushed. He saw some reason for doing it, but he flushed way to the left, flushed all the way to the boundary, you might recall. Took a pretty hard hit on the boundary. He's got to get that inside shoulder down so that he doesn't get stood up so much on that hit. It was a perfectly legal hit. But the other thing to think about, he ran a long way for very limited yardage. In general, when you step up in the pocket, sometimes the best opportunity you have is right there in front of you. Sometimes there's green grass in a more vertical sense. And let's face it, Spencer's not going to outrun anybody to the boundary. So if there's any green grass up in front, take that green grass. And of course, like we've talked about before, if it is a critical down, then try to find a way to get the first down yardage. The best way to gain that yardage, of course, is to be vertical with your path.
Appreciate the super sticker from Ben. Thank you, Ben, for being here and for supporting the show with the super sticker. And of course, you can also support the show by sponsoring. You see the email at the bottom of the screen if you're interested in sponsoring the show, or certainly you can donate in the description below, Venmo, Cash App, and PayPal. Eric says, Corey, I guess he's giving me this question, Don. He says, you think Brian leaves next year and the analyst steps in as the new OC and QB's coach? I would not count on that happening. Is it a possibility? I'm sure. I mean, there were rumors that Brian was looking to head to the league this past offseason. So I guess anything's possible, and John Budmeyer would probably be a candidate. But John Budmeyer is probably not going to be here next year in this same role, although he's making some good money being an analyst right now at Iowa. So I wouldn't count on that, Eric, but I wouldn't rule it out. Charles reminds us that you're the GOAT, Don. You're Stuntman Don and Don's Dozen.
What is Don's Dozen? I don't know what that is.
Idea. Appreciate Hawkeye Guy. I'm interested in Coach Patterson's perspective on what a difference the rain would have had on the passing game. And he adds, thank you for providing the forum. Thank you, Hawkeye Guy, for the question and the comment. How much does rain affect the passing game? We've seen plenty of rain these last 2 games.
Well, I couldn't help but notice. I thought that Spencer demonstrated better touch last night. We've talked about it before. Not everything has to be a fastball. And there were times when he took a little pace off the ball, made it a little bit easier to catch. That's a good thing, of course. Slant routes are a good example. It's not so much about velocity as it is location. You've heard me say that before, Corey. Let's be sure to put the ball where the defender can't get to it, so that he has to play through the receiver. And then, of course, maybe we either get the catch or we get the foul, one or the other. Either one we can live with.
And Metallica brings up the Big Ten. There have been some teams losing. These have been kind of a rough 2 weeks for the Big Ten. Maryland struggling with SMU. Rutgers struggling with Temple. We see Michigan State get beat by Washington. We know Iowa losing at home to Iowa State. Northwestern losing to Southern Illinois. And Duke back-to-back. That's a rough stretch, Don.
And let's not forget the Badgers losing to Washington State.
Good news is Penn State did look good on the road at Auburn. That's one the Big Ten needed.
Yes, they did. Right now, I'm glad that Penn State's not on our schedule.
I agree. Hair Trigger says, how did the O-line get this bad? Something I'd love to ask. He's asking the coaches, Don. But this is still a young line. But that's a hard question to answer, isn't it, Don? I mean, is it the Chris Doyle leaving? Is it, Tim Polasek leaving? But there were also, I bring up 2019. That was Polasek and Doyle were both here in 19, and that was a poor offensive line in 19. So how do you pinpoint that, Don?
Very difficult to do. I'm no expert on offensive line play, of course, but I do think, I'll just say it this way. The guys that went on to play in the NFL that played offensive line or defensive line, in general, they gave really high marks to Chris Doyle for helping them to realize their full ability. And you heard me say before that being a strength coach is a little bit like being a drill sergeant in the Army. You're probably not going to get any awards for being the nicest guy, but your challenge, of course, is in the case of a drill sergeant, you're preparing them for war, and your goal is that they come back alive. And of course, a strength coach in football is preparing his guys to excel, even when the chips are down, when it's really difficult to be able to play even one more snap. Maybe terrible playing conditions, or maybe you're simply going up against an All-American player. You obviously got to be at your best if you're inferior to the guy that's lined up across from you.
Destiny Pyre brings up the Iowa offense still ranked dead last, 131 in the country in total offense. They're a little closer to 130 than they were. New Mexico State at 130 right now. But boy, you got two really good defenses on the schedule here these next two games in Rutgers and Michigan. So we'll see if Iowa's offense actually has improved or if what we saw last night was purely a result of opponent. Lemansky, thank you for the super chat. Thank you, Don and Corey. Turnovers to come at Rutgers and Parker, I trust. I would not be surprised to see some turnovers. And he adds, with inaccurate throws and O-line challenges, does it make sense to be creative with throws to backs in a variety of routes in Big Ten play?
Sure. Yeah, that should be part of the package. And you've already seen a couple of good examples. Let's give the offensive staff credit. The touchdown pass to Arlen Bruce. You remember how that play started? Arlen Bruce actually was the fly man. He was flying across the formation. Sometimes we hand him the ball, of course, on a fly sweep. In that case,
no one covered him.
No one covered him. You're right. And in the meantime, of course, it was also play action pass. So the fly man, he wasn't getting the ball. We faked to the back, but you've heard me often say, Corey, a really good thought for any play action pass, if you can come up with a way of throwing the ball to a faking back. Once the back's faked, defenses tend to forget about the back. He's often forgotten about. And of course, that happens sometimes. And in this case, the fly man, we had a flash fake to him. It's conceivable we were going to give the ball to Arlen on a fly sweep. That's not the case. Then we faked into the line. And then, of course, we threw the ball back to a wide open Arlen Bruce, and a great catch on his part. Another possibility, did you notice this action? We had an action that we showed where we faked into the line. We faked a reverse and then threw deep. Remember that? That's good football. That's good football to do that stuff because that's something out of the ordinary. And if it's out of the ordinary, it has a little better chance of working because they haven't practiced it. They haven't seen it.
And how about this, Don? 2nd and 1, we took advantage of a waist down.
I think the first 2nd and 1 we did not.
No, you're right, but I'm just saying they did take advantage of a waist down. There was a 2nd and 1 shot down the field.
Well, our touchdown to Arlen Bruce was on 3rd and 1. And, of course, one reason we threw it is because I'm sure we were prepared to go for it on 4th down.
Pete Larson, thank you, Pete. You two are quite the dynamic duo. Great show always. Thank you for the super chat, Pete. And Apocalypse Sal wants me to go pick some corn. I never detasseled Donna. That's probably the closest you could get to picking corn. Did you ever detassel at a young age? You were down in Texas.
I did not. I chopped cotton for 50 cents an hour. Of course, I was born in 1950, so gas was cheap back in those days too. But I do remember working 10 hours a day for $5. And again, $5, of course, would fill up your gas tank and then some. So I did that, and I also did a thing in Texas. They just simply refer to it as hauling hay. And if you've ever loaded hay onto a trailer and then had to put the hay up in a barn, that's difficult and hot work too, especially in the state of Texas. So that's some of the hardest money I ever earned as a teenager, and I'm glad I had that opportunity because it taught me what hard work was really like. And I guess for that reason, I decided I'd rather be a football coach than a hay hauler because I'd hate to make a living just with my back. I think I wouldn't be very good at that.
We ran over a little bit, but to just real rapid, quick fire here on these final few questions, Don. Mark says, what would you tell Iowa center going into his first road start?
Well, thankfully, we don't have to worry that much about crowd noise. It could be loud, of course, depending on the game situation. But I would tell him, the field's still got the same dimensions as Kinnick. Prepare really well. That's the best way for you to be confident going into the game, is to have a great preparation. Make every day count. Just keep doing what you're doing. I think he's getting better. It takes a little bit of time. You improve really. It's not always a smooth path to improvement. Sometimes you make more improvement than other times, in part because of that guy that's lined up across from you so much of the time. So don't get discouraged. Better days are ahead. Just keep committed to be a little bit better next week than what you were this week.
And James brings up, it was sad to hear that LaShawn Williams lost his father, and that was the reason he didn't play yesterday, Don. Thoughts and prayers to him and his family. I just can't imagine. Just tragic. And I don't know the details on that. Don't need to know the details. But, Don, did you ever have – I'm sure you did. You had players that lost family members during the season. How do you handle that? Obviously, you were respected, but you were also I'm trying to think of your mantra as a coach. You want the coaches to like you. You want them to respect you. But there is a bit of the father-son element to being a head coach, correct?
Yeah, there is. Absolutely true. We had any number of untimely deaths, that people that related loved ones of players. And it kind of puts everything back in perspective. It doesn't matter if you're the starting running back. If you've lost a loved one and the funeral needs to be on the day of a game, then obviously you can't play in the game. You have to be with your family. That's more important. And that's the beauty of football, is because there's somebody behind you that's prepared to take up the slack. And they may recognize, I'm not quite as good a player as you are, but I'm going to do my best job of impersonating what you do in a game. And sometimes that kind of inspiration does lead to better play than what you might have expected as a coach.
Springtime brings up the topic of Justin Jacobs. When he gets healthy, Cooper's obviously been taking some snaps. They've been playing more of the cash with Jacobs out. We saw very little of Logan Klemp yesterday, Don. And Jay Higgins got in there a little bit too. But my point is, in line with Springtime's question, Alex's question here, what do you do to keep your best players on the field when you get Justin Jacobs back? I mean, where do you play? You just don't have enough positions out there for people right now, Don.
Right. If we're going to play three linebackers in the box, of course, I don't doubt for a second that Jacobs will be in that spot. The big question, of course, is what happens when that position is a walks-off position over a slot back, as an example. And now that's a hard decision, but certainly a decision that Phil Parker can make with the help of the linebacker coach, who is best suited to carry out the assignment that we're calling on any particular play. And maybe half the time Cooper's the better choice, and maybe the other half the time Justin's the better choice. The other team won't figure out that there's any kind of tie to the scheme based on which one's in the game. They won't be able to pick that up. Maybe if it started early in the game, maybe they kind of figure it out by the end of the game. But in general, of course, you could have them both share that position, that walk-off position, if you will, to cover an inside receiver. Probably depends on what they're trying to do with that defender. There's some categories where Cooper probably has an edge over Justin, and others where he has an edge over Cooper. And the coaches they're going to agonize over those kind of decisions because they recognize we're trying to put our best foot forward on every snap. And for that reason, we'll figure it out. They may not figure it out until after they've seen practice on Tuesday and Wednesday, because they need to look at that tape closely and see which solution appears to be the better.
Nathan brings up baling hay in August with Iowa humidity, which you were baling in Texas, though, right? Correct?
Yes.
Okay. But he says he's lived all over the place. And
I would simply tell Nathan this. Last week or 2 weeks ago when we were in the 90s here, Dallas was at 105, 106, and 107. So that's a little bit more difficult than 90, 93, 94.
Not as humid down there, Don.
I don't know about that. I've seen hot and humid, believe me.
Kenneth says, Coach, how many points does the offense need to get for Iowa's defense to have a chance to win?
One more than the
trying to be funny there, but what is the magic number against Rutgers? Because we really haven't even been able to. We're already overtime. We haven't really been able to preview Rutgers. But tell us a little bit about what you think Iowa needs to do against the Scarlet Knights.
Well, I would make the assumption that Iowa's offense needs to score every last point that we earn in the game, because we should not assume that the defense is going to score points. That's not really what they're designed to do. Sometimes, because of the way they play, they have the opportunity and take advantage of it to score points. But more important, and this happens in every game, what they can do every game is give us great field position through turnovers. And sometimes turnovers don't turn directly into points, but indirectly they do. They provide us with great field position. With a little bit of luck, we can take advantage of it and score 6 every time.
Erica wants to know what you thought of the cameo videos from Bob Stoops and Fran McCaffrey, Don. I know you probably saw those went viral. I don't really know. I can tell you, Erica, what I thought of them. Yeah, you chuckle at them, but I think in reality we all knew that. At first, I didn't know what to think of them, but I think we figured out rather quickly that they were erroneous. But I'm assuming you saw the cameo videos, Don.
Even to include the one where Bob Stoops' voice is superimposed over Kirk. I think they're all in poor taste.
Sure.
And I don't fault Fran or Bobby for those happening. As I understand it, when they shoot those, they might shoot 10 of them at one time, or maybe 20. I don't know. They're just reading one script after another. And as most of our listeners know, as I understand it, Fran's cameo appearances all go to the Children's Hospital.
Right.
Bobby's not doing it for the money. Bobby's not going to run out of money in this lifetime or even his next lifetime. So it's just disappointing to me that somebody thinks that's funny, because it's not very funny. It really isn't.
I giggled, Don. Don't fault me. I giggled a little bit, but I understand where you're coming from. James says, why do you think they never put Padilla in? We talked about that earlier. I don't think we really have a good answer to that, Don.
Well, some people Padilla fans might argue they were really, really fearful that Padilla would go out there and light it up, and then we'd really have a problem. I'm not saying that's why it didn't happen. I don't know why it didn't happen. I wish it would have happened, if only to protect Petrus, because we value Petrus as our starting quarterback, obviously, and if we have a chance to guarantee to keep him healthy, then we should take advantage of it.
Lemansky, appreciate the super chat. Corey, last night that OSU fan told you to go pick corn. Let's take away his ethanol-based gas. I don't remember that, Lemansky. I guess I do remember that, but I don't remember that comment. But thank you for explaining the earlier comment. And Colin brings up, would you consider yourself an expert in offense? I would consider you an expert in offense, Don. He says, what's the glaring difference between the OC who is an expert and the one we currently have? I think that's maybe an unfair question a little bit. I understand the purpose of the question, Don, but I'll rephrase the question because I want to make this a fair question for you. What makes a good OC?
A good OC has to have an incredible work ethic. He has to be committed to outworking the other team that we're preparing for. He has to have great imagination. He has to continue. When he looks at film, he has to continually ask the question, what if we did this? What if we did that? In other words, you can't just mimic what somebody else did. Maybe there's a running play that's really been effective for the last 3 opponents of our upcoming opponent, and yet there hadn't been a single play action pass off that same run action. Why not? Why didn't one of those other teams think to run play action off that exact same run play? Let's run that play action. So you got to think outside the box. You got to use your imagination. And a prime example, I give our staff credit, and ultimately I give Brian credit because he's the OC. That was a well-conceived play, the touchdown pass to number 10. He was a fly man, and when he didn't get the ball, people kind of forgot about him for a second, especially because we were faking to our back, and lo and behold, because he came roaring out of our backfield with a lot of speed, before they knew it, he was on top of him and was open in the end zone. And then, of course, hats off to Arlen for making a great catch on that play too. That's smart football. Faking into the line and faking a reverse and trying to throw deep. That's smart football. So you got to think outside the box. You got to continually try to build on a game plan so that you never, ever find yourself running out of plays. When I say running out of plays, not just plays, but plays that you have a lot of confidence can work. And I appreciated what Marv said the other day. Marv Cook, of course, is one of my all-time favorite players, and of course, a very successful high school coach. And he mentioned the other day at Garden Club, in talking about me, he said, "You need to realize if another team wanted to be predictable with how they played," and he mentioned if it was Miami or Florida. And of course, we talked a little bit about attacking Miami years ago. You got to have man beaters to beat man coverage, right? You got to have a lot of man beaters. But Marv's point was whether it's Miami or Ohio State or Michigan, you got to find a way to make them pay. And I was grateful for Marv what he said. He said, Coach P would not only make them pay, he would make it really painful for them to pay. And he's thinking of examples like 76 Whitehead against Ohio State. You know, we actually outsmarted them on that play. Dick Vermeil said that's a classic example of one coaching staff outsmarting the other. And that's the kind of thing that any coach would like to hear, that we reflect on how well he prepares for a game, that you actually did a better job preparing your players for the game. And part of that preparation, it does involve developing a great call sheet. And if you don't have enough plays, you better develop a few more. So that's a long answer, but obviously it's something I'm pretty passionate about. You know, that's your job as a coach. I made the comment a week ago, maybe not on your show, Corey, but on some other show. I said, here's where we are. Our coaches this year, for the way the season started, there's no way around it. They have to do the best job of coaching they've ever done in their entire lives. I'm talking about on offense. You know, we have to up the bar on offense so that we're not just an average offense. We have to somehow strive to be above average. And that's not going to be easy based on personnel and based on inexperience, but we have to aspire to that. Because if we don't, we're cheating our players. You know, what we did, I'll say it this way. Coach Fry, based on the Iowa State game, he would have called us in and he would have said, men, we have to do a better job next week because last week was not even close enough to getting the job done. And by the way, if you really like your job, it would behoove you to do a better job of coaching because – and he would even tell the players, he would say, guys, if you like your coaches, I know they're a good bunch of guys. If you really like them, you better help them out. You better play better than what you played. And I can promise you the coaches are going to do their part. Coach Fry's telling the players this. He would say, I will guarantee you our coaches are going to work longer and harder to have a great plan next week than what we had this past week. And that's the challenge for our coaching staff on offense, is to do the best job of coaching they ever have. That's what Coach Ferentz deserves, and that's what the players deserve. So I'm behind those guys, and I'm confident they're going to work longer and harder than they have. I would suggest to you they did a better job of game planning for Nevada than they did for Iowa State. Absolutely. Because we saw some wrinkles that we hadn't seen, and that made us more difficult to defend. And I don't doubt they're going to continue to do that in the weeks ahead.
And Phil Parker's Pa, like the username, says, Don and Corey, if we beat Rutgers, some Kinnick magic. I doubt it, but I wouldn't outrule it because we have – the fact of the matter is it's probably not the best Big Ten game that week. So originally it looked like it would be. My guess is it's not. I haven't looked at the rest of the schedule, but we may get that. I would guess a mid-afternoon game, but it could be 11 a.m. on Fox. But my guess is it won't be a third straight. That'd be 3 straight night games for Iowa, 4 if you count the late 3 p.m. start against Iowa State the week prior.
Well, my hope for the Michigan game, Corey, is we're not an 11 a.m. kick. The only reason I say that is because I'm responsible for babysitting the grand dog until noon. So if it's an 11 a.m. kick, I'm pretty sure we're going to have to take our chances with the dog in the house all by ourselves. I don't want to do that.
And if I missed your comment in the chat, I apologize. We ran about 20 minutes past what I wanted to run here. I want to remind everybody that I'll be live Wednesday at 9 p.m. Central Time for a live edition of Hawkeye Hangout, a live call-in show right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Trying to make this a regular thing, and we had some good response last week, so we'll keep plugging away with it. Again, Wednesday, 9 p.m. Central Time, Hawkeye Hangout. This show, along with all of our other podcasted content, will be available on Spotify, Anchor, Google, Apple, Amazon, wherever you listen to your podcasts. But again, we'll be live on Wednesday. As always, myself and the voice of college football, who I saw Mark was in the chat this afternoon or this evening. We'll be live Tuesday over at the Iowa Football at the Voice of College Football channel for Iowa Hawkeyes Live. We'll be taking a look at Rutgers and probably getting a view from the enemy, so to speak, and we should be enjoyable. I said it before the season started, Don. I'm nervous about this game, and I stand by that. Any parting thoughts? I know we didn't really take a deep dive into Iowa Rutgers for next Saturday, but any parting thoughts on the Scarlet Knights?
Well, you bring up a good point, Corey. You got to be sure that the players aren't looking ahead to, obviously, a real test against Michigan. One at a time. You've heard me say before, it's like a hurdle race. You focus only on the next hurdle because the others don't matter. You got to get over the next hurdle.
All right, folks. We will talk soon. Thank you all for being here. And again, if I missed your comment, I apologize. We'll be back. I'll be back on Wednesday, 9 p.m. Central Time, right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm, and Tuesday at 4:30 with Mark Rogers, Iowa football at the voice of college football. Have a great night.